Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chelius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everybody. Today's podcast is sponsored by Venngage. Venngage is a design platform that's not just about creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. Venngage doesn't just simplify your design process, but it takes it up a notch with built-in accessibility features. Whether you're looking to run an accessibility check on your designs or export them in the PDF UA format, Venngage has you covered. So head on over to venngage.com and check them out. My name is Chad Chelius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Accessibility Training.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am director of media productions here at Chax Accessibility Training. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. If you'd like your certification, head over to accessibilityassociation.org/certification and get more information, not only about the ADS, but the web accessibility specialist, et cetera, et cetera. I was on LinkedIn and somebody was asking, hey, they were talking about accessibility or certification for accessibility being offered at a conference, Chad, being as like come to our conference, take a bunch of classes at our conference, and we'll certify you as an accessible. And this person was a web accessibility specialist. And they're like, I shouldn't have to go pay money to go to your conference and attend to all this stuff just to get a certification. I do this for a living. It's my job. I do it every single day. I should be able to pass a test and off we go. And they didn't know about IAAP. So I chimed in and said, hey, by the way, you go, your job is your cred, you have to have a couple years, right? That's one of the special things about IAAP. They actually vet you before you can take the test, which I kind of wasn't on board with in the beginning, but now I get it. The idea that you should be doing this for a year or two before you really kind of get certified makes a lot of sense.
And like some people may agree or disagree with me about this, but like having have taken many Adobe exams over the years, I'm not really a fan of studying for the exam, like actively studying for the exam. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I don't think there's a problem with like reviewing the material and kind of making sure that, you're familiar with it. Right. But I feel like if you do this day in and day out, like you should be able to pass, these exams, right? And like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with reviewing the material and stuff like that, but I don't agree with cramming to pass, a certification exam, right? I feel like
because either you know it or you don't, right?
Right.
And that's that makes a lot of sense. That the idea is that it's to validate what you know, not study. Yeah. However, I have not taken my Adobe certified trainer test for some of the programs, because in the programs there's a lot to know, right? There's stuff I never use. And so when they ask you, where is this and this menu, or where do you go to find this? I don't know. I don't use that feature, and for me, that's where I have to study.
Well, and that's where we've seen a bit of a shift, right? Because I've helped write some of the Adobe exams. And one of the requirements was you could not ask a question that required rote memorization, meaning just what you said. You can't ask somebody, where would I find object export options in the list of menus in InDesign? What's the value in knowing that? Right? Like, who cares if I got to go to a couple of menus to find it? I know what I'm looking for. Right? Where just because I can memorize it, that doesn't really quantify my level of skill in the program. So, that being said, I mean, I recently took an exam and there were a couple questions in there that required rote memorization. Now I knew it, but I don't agree with that for sure. I think you should be testing on the knowledge of the application, not memorizing where a feature is located, right?
Yep.
Who cares, right?
I get
Who
that.
cares?
Yeah.
Because even
Hey,
to this day, sometimes I have to go through because I usually use the keyboard shortcut.
right.
But every now and then somebody will say, "Hey, where do I find this feature?" I'm like, "Oh crap, I don't remember because I always use the shortcut." So yeah,
Well, it's interesting, Chad. You've mentioned quick apply for InDesign many times, and I've heard Anne Marie Concepcion talk about quick apply many times in her trainings, and I've never really used it. And the other day, I accidentally pressed the shortcut key for quick apply, and I was like, "Huh." And so I forget. Even now, I forget what the shortcut key is. Something Control W, or what
command
is it?
return.
Command return. Oh, that's why, because I was trying to do something else, and I pressed control. For me, I'm a PC guy, right?
Oh,
Control
right.
return, and opened it up. I'm like, oh, let me see if this is in here, and I typed it in. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. Like control enter, control enter, control enter, and I was like, wow, this really makes it nice. I can see where this applies. But I've been using InDesign since it was all just PageMaker and never really used that feature. So you learn something new every day.
It's a really cool feature because you can literally search for the command, right?
Right.
Like just what we were just talking about, where I said like object export options, right? And I'm like, oh
Right.
shoot, which menu is that? But if you press Control Enter or Command Enter and you type object export, it'll pop up, and you just hit Enter, and it brings it up. So it's a really great feature. It really is nice.
While you were talking, I opened up, and I have InDesign open. I opened up Quick Apply, right? Control Enter, and then I started typing hyphenation because I hate hyphenation. Like for me, as a person with ADHD, it's a cognitive disability. My brain gets that little dash, and then I just have to stutter step for just a minute to connect it to the other word, or just a second. So I just turn hyphenation off. But I use Quick Apply to get to hyphenation rather than going into the style and going through. If I just need it in a quick way to kind of just fix this one little piece. But on that topic, Chad, we'll talk a little bit about AI, because like I said, hate hyphenation in documents. And so the other day I thought, I wonder if ChatGPT could help me write a script. And so I asked ChatGPT, help me write a script for Adobe InDesign to turn off hyphenation in every style in the styles panel. And at first it did it, and I copied it in, and it didn't work. And I'm like, crap. So I looked at the error. What it was the basic paragraph style was the flaw. I didn't tell it to account for the basic paragraphs, the not style, the default style, right? And so I told it, now rewrite the script with excluding the basic paragraph style, and it did it, and it worked great. And now I have a little script that when I want to come into a document, I'm just somebody else's, made 50 styles. I can just tell it, boom, turn off hyphenation for all of them in like one quick shot. So that's cool.
Great. I mean, I think you and I are a little bit different on our approach to that. Like, I'm a huge advocate. Any of my heading styles, always turn off hyphenation, right? There's not a situation in the universe where I want my heading hyphenated, right? So those I always turn off. But for body copy, that can get a little bit tricky, right? Because for the typographers in our audience, right, the narrower, I'm using my hands here, the narrower your line length, the more you need hyphenation, right? Like as your line length gets narrower, you almost need it, because otherwise we call it the big rivers of white space, that you get if it's a line left, it would be on the right side, or but as your line length grows, now you're more inclined to be able to eliminate hyphenation in your content without as much visual ugliness, for lack of a better term, right? Yeah.
Well, remember that people, just as a point of thought, InDesign, some people have asked even on the Facebook group, if you guys are unaware, we have a PDF accessibility Facebook group. We have blown past 4,600 members, Chad. We're approaching 4,700 members.
That's great.
But someone had asked, does it matter whether I have columns in my document or not? And for accessibility. And I said, well, it actually does. If you are targeting people, if people don't just use screen readers, they also use screen magnifiers. And when you have a 2-column layout in your design, you force someone, if you think about the old typewriter days, you get to the end of the line, you swoop, go back and carriage return and start again and go back and forth and back and forth. When you have 2 columns, you now have doubled the amount of work that person has to do to read those columns, because they have to go back and back and back and back every single column. And that can be a huge workflow for them, a huge workflow barrier because of the extra effort it takes. So when you're considering people with low vision who might use screen magnifiers, it is better to have fewer columns than it is to have more columns. So just a thought.
Well, that's interesting too, Dax, because I mean, even as a sighted user, right? I mean, you and I have experienced that where, you open up a PDF on your mobile phone and the whole constant pinch and zoom and drag to try to read, right? And to be fair, a longer column in that situation is harder to read.
Well, that's where liquid layout.
Sure. But I mean, like you were mentioning the screen magnifier.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
if I stay in that realm, right, when we're pinching and zooming and everything, that's essentially what people with screen magnifiers are doing.
Yep.
And so it really does create, it's really not a great experience. And yeah, that's where I did that video showing liquid mode and how much of a nicer experience it can be, if you leverage that.
Yeah, reflow, which is why people say, oh, well, you don't need to worry about reading order. And like, no, people use reflow and there's a reason for it. And this is one of those reasons where if you use reflow and you don't have bounding boxes set, or, people say, why do I need to worry about bounding boxes errors in pack checker? And I'm like, well, because when reflow, they need to know the structure, the size of that image. Otherwise, it just goes back to original size, which could be if someone pasted it in at some giant size and then resized it in the document, you could end up with a giant disruption in your reading order. So anyway, we're getting a little off topic.
Well, and I'm going to stay off topic
by me. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to stay off topic for a second because I wanted to bring something up as we were talking about InDesign. One of the things that is eluding me, and I don't know if you've run into this or not, but sometimes I'll get a document and, who knows how they got where they did, but I'll click on text and in the paragraph styles panel, it'll say no style, right? So like there's literally no style applied.
Mm-hmm.
However, somehow no style is mapped to a heading tag.
What?
I'm telling you, dude, I've run into this more than one time.
Wow.
And I'm like, how did you even do this? Right? I'm like, if you said to me, Chad, this is what I want to do, I don't know that I could tell you how to do it,
Yeah.
And I mean, the solution is pretty simple. Just create a style for it and tell it what you want it to map it to. But I've had situations where like all of the text was no style and it was mapped to like an H2. And I'm like, this is, it's really bizarre. So I can't figure out how they're doing it. Maybe someday I'll discover that, what the problem is.
I was thinking about made to tag and I was writing an outline for one of our videos, what we're going to do for one of our clients for made to tag. And I noticed there's a little checkbox in there for made to tag that actually says, I'm gonna get it here. It's in so made to tag is a plugin for InDesign for those of you who don't know, and it's a 7-task walkthrough of all the accessibility things you should be checking for, and some things you might not even think to check for. And one of the tasks, task 1, is review and define and review export tags. And as I was looking through this, at the bottom, there's this checkbox that says reduce structure to predefined types. And I thought, what does this do? And what I realized what it does is it removes the role map. On export, there is no more role map that says my style of H1 dark blue is now mapped to an H1. It's just H1, H2, H3 on export. So I thought that was a pretty cool little extra
Yeah.
feature, because I do it, when I open Common Look, because I use Common Look as my main tool. The first thing I do is flatten the tags tree so that I get rid of all my containers, and then I remove the role map, which makes everything the H1, H2, H3. So this saves me a step, because I can do that inside made to tag. Now, if they could have another checkbox that says flatten the tags tree, now dude, that would be something.
And Exeo, if you're listening, and I know those guys do listen to our podcast occasionally. So Exeo, if you're listening, if you could add a checkbox that says remove all container tags, you would get elevated to like the height. You know what I mean? Like that would be, because that's the first thing I do in every PDF I create is I remove the container tags, because they get in my way. I don't want to see them. I just want to see the tags that matter. So
and we're talking about the section tags that are created by PowerPoint, by Word, by InDesign. Anytime you make a separate text box, it exports as a section tag. And so sometimes you'll have 500 section tags and everything's buried inside. Even auto tag in Acrobat will create section tags, which is,
it does,
which is interesting,
which is weird, right?
Yeah.
I would say section tags and article tags, right? I would love it if they, and you know what? Bring up a dialog box and say, which containers do you want to get rid of, right? And make sure you give me a select all button. Right.
Yeah. But I mean, you want to be careful, because there are some container tags that we do want, like paragraph is considered a container tag because if it has a figure as a child, right? Once you have something as a child, how do you differentiate between a figure inside a paragraph tag and a section and a paragraph inside a section tag? How do you programmatically make that distinction?
Well, it would be anything that does not contain marked content.
Okay. All right. Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Why? But think about a TOC. A TOC contains a TOCI. It doesn't contain any content. So I think there's some noodling to do. But I think there's a way.
Point taken. Yeah.
Common Look does it with flatten the tags tree. So they've figured out the secret sauce. Somehow there is a way to do it, because they've done it. So. Well,
and on that topic, Dax, I'll bring this up now. So many of our audience knows that you and I, in our past, had a brief relationship with AbleDocs, a company that you and I both used to work for a very brief period of time. So to give everybody a little bit of update on that, AbleDocs is no more. They got purchased by a company called GrackleDocs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, GrackleDocs got their start. Originally, they had a product that helped make Google Docs accessible, right? That was GrackleDocs' foray into accessibility. Well, when AbleDocs, effectively, they filed Chapter 11, I believe. I think they probably call it something different in Canada. But so GrackleDocs basically purchased AbleDocs. And GrackleDocs is a much better company, much more reputable company. And they're doing some really good stuff. And they have released a product for document remediation. And it's called Grackle PDF. And it's just something for everybody to be aware of. We've talked many times on this podcast about third-party tools that we like to use.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell everybody that I've given Grackle PDF a run through, and have been pretty impressed with its capabilities. And when you just mentioned that, Dax, flattening the tags tree, GrackleDocs has that feature where you basically click a button and you say, get rid of all these container tags, and boom, in like 2 seconds, it's done. So anybody out there who's looking for third-party tools or evaluating third-party tools, definitely take a hard look at Grackle PDF. If I remember right, the price tag of Grackle PDF is about $950. So in the scheme of cost it's kind of right around where a lot of the other products are as well. Common Look is probably, I think, at the very top of that list as far as cost goes, but arguably probably the most powerful as well, you know?
I'm on their page. I'm looking at their testimonials at the bottom, right? Because it's a new product, right? This isn't
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that was
yeah.
done yesterday. Connecting Waters Charter School says, dude, you guys are on it like hooked on phonics as their as their as their
That
testimonial, which is interesting, right? I mean, you can go to Grackle Docs and you can fill out their form, right? If you go to Grackle Docs and go to products and services, you can click on Grackle PDF, and then there is an inquiry form. And so there's not a way to download it, a demo currently, but you can get that demo, I'm sure, if you inquire with them on what to do. So awesome.
Yeah. So again, just take a look at it. You know, I know we are constantly getting inquiries from people who are like, "What tool should I use?" Right, and
Right.
that's a really hard question to answer. I mean, Dax, you and I use a plethora of tools, right? I mean, I don't stick with one particular tool. It really depends on the problem I'm trying to solve, but you know, we leverage quite a few tools, and recently I've added Grackle PDF to that list of tools, and I've been pretty impressed.
Yeah.
You know, the biggest challenge with all of these tools is getting used to their UI,
Yeah.
right? You know, getting
It's
used to like,
always, yeah.
yeah, you know, because they're all different, you know what I mean? And so that creates a little bit of a challenge. But I will say I've been very impressed with their product, and I've used it on a couple of projects recently, and it's really nice. Really
Well,
nice.
speaking of UI, well, I'll go back to that. Speaking of UI, but I always tell people when they ask me what tool should I use, I said, well, if I'm going to work on my car, what's the one tool you should have?
Yeah.
What are you doing? If I'm under the car doing an oil change, I need a screwdriver, because I got to take off that stupid panel that covers the whole undercarriage of my car so I can get to the oil pan plug that I need to get to. So the tool that somebody
And
might
then you
think,
need a strap wrench
right,
to unscrew the oil filter, right? You know what I mean?
right,
So I love what you're saying, Dax, and you're 100% right. It's like when clients ask me this question, I try to get out of them. I try to be like, well, what tasks are you typically performing, right?
yeah,
You know, um, and that can help, you know, whittle it down.
yep,
Um, you know, I would say like for clients who say people just give me PDFs and tell me to make them accessible,
mm-hmm.
I'm usually going to recommend Common Look.
Yeah,
Right. Because in that situation, you need a tool that can do a really wide variety of tasks. Now,
right,
if you're
but
getting PDFs that are generally made from InDesign,
mm-hmm.
well, now I could give you a couple of tools that'll do what you need it to, and it'll do it really efficiently. What were you going to say, Dax?
I was going to say, and if they say, well, you know, if you have those PDFs and they're all full of really complex tables or lots of tables in general, right?
Yeah.
Access PDF is a outstanding tool that
Yeah.
saves a huge amount of time. But would I choose Access PDF at base level over Common Look? The answer is no. I think that they excel in different areas, and there is no tool out there better for complex tables in a PDF than Access PDF. But if I'm
Yeah.
in InDesign creating those source tables in InDesign, that same tool is going to be made to tag, because I can do
Yeah.
everything Access PDF can do in the source file, and I never have to do it again. I think that's great, you know, so we call that born accessibility. And so those tools really are, you know, based on what it is that you're doing, you know, and I think that it really is one of those things where there is no right one answer. It really boils down to, what are you doing? What platform are you on? What's your IT like? What kind of documents are you getting? How I hate to say this, but how accessible do they need to be, right? Because if I'm gonna, you know, say, well, you could do this with Acrobat, but if you really need them to be very bulletproof, I'm gonna say you really need to have pack checker, right? And
Yeah.
so there's just all sorts of facets to it, which is why at the the conference coming up later this year, the Creative Pro Design and Accessibility Summit, there's always a session on useful tools, because there are just so many tools that you just can't know them all. So
no. And really, like I said, it really comes down to your workflow, right?
yeah,
Like for me, most of the files that I work with come from InDesign.
yep,
So I very rarely use Common Look. The only
sure,
time I really need Common Look in that workflow is to fix my footnotes and endnotes.
sure,
Then it's a deal. And if my document has 150 endnotes in it, oh, you're darn tootin' I'm using Common Look, right? I mean, because
right,
that would be arduous to fix, right?
yep,
But other than that, and again, guys, like we get a lot of people that we talk to, Dax. I think you'll agree with me on that, where people are like, how can I do this faster?
right,
And our answer is usually use a third party tool.
right.
And the reply we get from that, oh, my company will never buy that. I would encourage you guys, put some time into this and do an ROI on the purchase of your product. What I would tell you to do is document how long it takes you to manually fix 5 files, right? And then determine how many files are you doing over the course of the year.
Right.
You can create an ROI very easily that will justify the expense of that tool, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, we're just here to try to help you through this, right? But I mean, for a company to say, oh no, we're not going to spend money on this, we'd rather pay you your hourly rate time over time to fix these rather than allow you to do it efficiently, right? So, it's really an easy sell once you do an ROI and explain how long it's taking you to do this work and how much
I'm
time they could save.
I'm on a mechanics kick right now. There have been times, my mechanics metaphors. There have been times where I've watched a video or done something to repair something in my car, and there's some bolt I can't get to, some area I can't get in there, and I'm, busting knuckles and trying to, like, my wrench is moving a 16th of an inch or less to undo this bolt, and I just can't get it. And then I find some video or something somewhere else online that says, oh, there's a specific tool, or someone they welded or bent or heated this tool so that it comes in the right angle to get to that bolt. And they're like, yeah, you just use this tool and it works great. That's exactly how it is for accessibility, right? You can do this very painstakingly with just Acrobat and some really deep dive knowledge. However, if you're trying to do this without driving yourself mad, or without wasting a lot of time or spending a lot of time, then there are tools that are out there to help you. In fact, Chad, we're going to be doing a webinar in just a few days on the 17th. We are going to be doing a webinar that's going to be talking about how organizations at scale can have accessibility programs. So if, what I mean by at scale is that if you are a large corporation and you've got 100 people, 50 people, all creating Word docs or PDFs or social media posts or whatever, they're creating content in large volumes, and you need them all to be doing it accessibly. What are some of the things you should consider, and what should you think about from a workflow standpoint? And you and I are going to drop some knowledge and some really helpful tips on what you can do to kind of smooth out your workflow process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's going to be a really good webinar. I mean, we've mentioned, Venngage is a sponsor of this podcast, right? But
Right.
We've been working with Venngage on a regular basis. And, you and I have just both been super impressed with their product, because to be fair, it's not a product that you and I would really use in our day to day.
Right.
But it is a product that many companies are leveraging. There's many companies out there who have multiple licenses of Canva for creating various elements. And then on the back end, they say, oh, by the way, this has to be accessible.
Right.
And that's when all of a sudden, that they're kind of, like, it hits them in the face. They're like, oh my gosh, how do I make this happen? And so we're going to talk about how Venngage can help people achieve that.
Yeah, I'm excited, and we've got a pretty packed house. So if you're interested, and there's going to be some handouts for you. So if you one of the things that I think is going to be really great is we're going to give you some talking points on how to approach accessibility to your C-suite executives or managers, that will help you kind of answer the "I don't have budget for this" questions. And in addition to that, you're going to get our top 10 things that you can do for accessibility without being an expert, and a few other little sheets that are really gonna help you kind of start to push that needle the other direction. So head over to our website. If you want to quickly register for that, go over to our website, and at the top you're going to see a little banner that says register for the webinar, and you can get your seat. I think it'll be great.
Yeah.
And that's going to be on the 17th. I'm sorry, I should have said on the 17th, July 17th at 1 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So
4 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. While we're talking about the website, Dax, something that we've recently added to our website that I want to make everybody aware of. So one of the challenges that we run into in Adobe InDesign is defining the tag order of content in the exported PDF. And the tool we need to use in InDesign to make that happen is a tool called the Articles panel.
Right.
And the Articles panel, I always say that the term I use is the Articles panel is an all or nothing proposition. If you use the Articles panel, everything in your document has to be added to the Articles panel.
If you want it to be read by assistive technology, right?
Exactly. And so what that means is you got to drag every item into the Articles panel, or I teach people how to create a keyboard shortcut to do it to make it a little more efficient. But the tricky thing about the Articles panel is once you've added everything, you're sitting there and you're like, did I get everything? Did I forget something? You know what I mean? Like, and so like there's always that question.
Right.
So Dax, you and I, with the help of our good friend Keith Gilbert, we developed a script that you can download. And basically what the script does is when you run it, it will hide everything on your page that is in the Articles panel.
Yep.
And that helps you to scroll through your document to evaluate. And as you're scrolling through, you're like, oh, shoot, I forgot this thing. Right. Yeah. And then you can add it to your Articles panel and, keep going. So what the script does is it hides everything to allow you to evaluate, make sure you've added everything that you want to be in the Articles panel. And it allows you to see it very quickly and do a quick evaluation to confirm that everything is in the Articles panel. And then the way the script works is if you run it again, then it just shows everything.
Gotcha.
So it's like super easy to use. And it's actually, to give credit where credit's due, it's a feature that's built into Made to Tag. And I had reached out to Exeo and I'm like, hey guys, like this is a really cool feature, but right now people have to buy an expensive tool to make it work. And I said, would you guys be okay if we scripted this and made it available? And what you'll notice is that when you run the script, you get a splash screen, and Exeo, we give credit to Exeo for inventing that feature or coming up with that feature. But yeah, so it's free. We're making it available to everybody for free. So check it out. Go ahead and download it and let us know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chad, that was a quick 35 minutes. we really flew through all that content. Some days it works like that, where we have a whole list. We've got a whole list of other topics we wanted to cover, and we're just out of time, right? At this point, we know that anything above about 35 or 40 minutes really starts to, be a commitment for people who are listening. And if you're listening in your car or on your commute or, on your way home or whatever, we just want to thank you for being listeners and followers of the Chax Chat podcast. I know one person who sits on their couch and streams this video podcast, watching it there on Apple TV. They pull us up, they sit down, and I just think that's amazing. They can just sit there imagining our audience with a bowl of popcorn, eating and watching. What's Chad gonna say next? What's Dax gonna say? I think that's just that's funny. But anyway,
Thank you everybody for thank you all for being regular listeners of this podcast. We appreciate you. We really, we understand that accessibility is not always super sexy, and we try to make it as interesting as we can, but we hope that you're getting value out of it and enjoying it. And again, we love to hear your feedback too. Like ping us on LinkedIn or email us, whatever. And
or join our Facebook group.
Join our Facebook group, of course.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, guys. Well, once again, we want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And we really want to thank Venngage for being our sponsor. Just as a reminder, Venngage is a design platform that's not about just creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. So make sure you head on over to venngage.com and check them out. My name is Chad Chelius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.